that, you are not ready for the job market. So make sure that you give thought to this. A good rubric is to say, in contrast to much work that has emphasized blah, 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 my research shows blah, blah, blah. Like if you could, you know, it gives you a starting point. Try plugging those in for your work. And of course, the contribution is going to shift based on the field. If I'm a cultural anthropologist of Japan who works on gender, I apply for Japan studies jobs, anthro jobs, and gender studies jobs. My contribution statement is going to be different for each of those fields. A Japan studies contribution is meaningless for anthropology. An anthro contribution is pretty much meaningless for Japan studies. Gender studies, same thing. So you have to have this contribution reframed for each field that you're going to be applying at. And this is very short. And by the way, don't go on and on. Here's the thing, real major temptation, major pitfall. This comes straight out of the culture of graduate programs. Don't go on and on and on about how everybody else sucks. Don't do it. I just want to make you not do that. It doesn't make you look smarter. It makes you look like a jerk. And first of all, some of the people who do that might be reading your letter. So it's also stupid. But even if they aren't, they're tremendously irritated by the mean-spiritedness and the arrogance and the egotism involved in, well, you know, Nelson wrote 2 years ago on this subject, but he grossly overestimated the impact of such and such. But meanwhile, Smith wrote on it, but shamefully neglected the question of. And this is the kind of language. I mean, I see this every day. And just banish it. It does not make you look smarter. So you can merely remark, the field has not entirely addressed the subject of blah, 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 mine shows blah, blah, blah. So this is fairly neutral language. So here's the contribution paragraph from that previous client. My scholarship contributes new perspectives in medical anthro and the connections between political economy, gender, and health. It bridges the anthropology and the health sciences by using both standard and locally derived methods to measure mental health, intervening in a long-standing debate in cross-cultural psychiatry about the dangers of medical imperialism in comparative mental health scholarship. This is a good statement of contribution. This is a, oh, interesting. And then she tacks on something else at the end. My focus on urban, middle, and upper-class women in low-income countries sheds new light on a rarely studied population. That's a less important one. Just because you're working on a new group of people is not that exciting. But tacked on to a stronger one, it's okay. And then your publication paragraph. I have 2 articles. Well, I mean, this is my example, is right here. I have 2 articles forthcoming based on this work. The first is in the Journal of X. The second is in the Journal of Y. I have another article in process that I plan to submit to the Journal of Z. I'm working on transforming my dissertation into a book. So just be very specific. Don't go into paragraphs and paragraphs about what the article is about. They really don't care. I mean, they don't care at this stage. Later, they start to care more when they've invested in you, but at this stage, they really want basically a quantitative tally of where you're at and do you have a plausible trajectory for tenure. I mean, you don't have to have, well, you can't have your articles for tenure now. You can't. They won't count. But do you have are you showing that you have a pace that promises that you will have articles for tenure for each year over the next 5 years? If you're in a book field, you do need a plan for the book. Did I say that here, or did I say that this morning? Did I not say it at all? This morning. You have to have a plan for the book. Even if you're still writing your dissertation, you need to have a sense of what presses might be interested. You can go to the MLA, for example, or the AAA, or whatever your conference is. You can try to talk to an editor and chat and do a pitch. They'll listen to you. I'm not saying they'll agree to publish it, but they will listen to your pitch of your book. They might say something to you, wow, that sounds great. When it's further along, send that to me. That's gold. You love that. That one little line, that means you get to transform that into a sentence in your job letter that says, an editor, or even name him, you know. Reynolds Smith at Duke University Press expressed interest in my book. That's good. You want to do that. And then say, I plan to submit a proposal to Duke University Press by the end of the summer. Whatever. Wait, you had your hand up first.
Yeah, should you list all of your publications? I mean, or is that's on the CV also?
Not all of them, if you have a lot. Most people just starting out only have a couple, and so it's easy to do this. If you're a person who has a whole bunch, no, absolutely not. You would only name maybe the 3 highlights or something like that, 4 highlights. Yeah. Okay.
If we have these, should we send them out in advance of going on the job market, or should we wait and then use them for a tenure case? If we already have one publication, I guess.
If you already have what?
One publication that's refereed, so these would just be.
So this morning at the keynote, I said you have to strategize your publications. So you need some pubs to get a job, and then you need a lot more pubs to get tenure, and third-year review and tenure. So that's what this question was about. If I have some articles that aren't on my dissertation, that haven't been published, but I already have one that has been published, should I publish it now, or them now, or should I hold them for the tenure case? This is tricky. There's no one-size-fits-all answer to that. It depends on your record and your topics and everything, a whole bunch of details. But if they're not on the dissertation, and you have a whole bunch of other articles that are on the dissertation that are going to be coming out, and a book, because you're in the humanities, then those sound like good articles to get out now, probably. With not knowing the rest of your story, I would suggest those sound like very good articles to send out. And there's two reasons for that. One, they're ready to send out, so get them out and benefit. But two, when you do a tenure case, your publications are evaluated, not just the number of them, but also their legibility in your discipline. Does that make sense? So if I were to be a cultural anthropologist to go up for tenure, and I have a whole bunch of articles on well, I'm just totally blanking now. I don't know, just like on jet skiing. That I might have the referee journal article on jet skiing. Even if I technically met their quantity rubric, I would not meet their, quality is not the right word, I wouldn't meet their disciplinary rubric. They have to be articles in the discipline. They have to show an organic linearity of development as a scholar. Does that make sense? So they don't all have to be exactly on your dissertation topic, but they have to be organically connected in a way that makes sense, so that you sound like a person who has a project, not just boom, 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 completely random, completely scattered, completely confusing and confused. You don't want to look like that. So that's why that is another reason why your two articles should probably get out now, because postponing them might make them look a little bit weird in the context of a tenure case. Yeah.
So if your research is interdisciplinary and has thematic coherence but spans different fields, how is the publication strategy judged if you have, a couple of articles in this field, a couple of articles in that field, but they're all belonging to
That's a great question. So because I had joint appointments in East Asian Studies and Anthro, and Anthro was my home, my tenure home, so they ran my tenure case, but I did have to show that I had published in both fields. I had to have articles that were strictly anthropology, and then I had to have a few that were strictly Japan studies, Asian studies. And so it just really came down to some very careful calculation. And if I knew that I didn't have it in me to publish more than 5 articles, that was all, and a book, but that was it, then I needed to say like, well, 3 of those are going to be in cultural anthro journals, and 2 of those are going to be in Japan studies journals. And that's a safe proportion that will work for tenure. And I didn't make that decision all by myself. I conferred with my mentors in the department, and they checked in with me. They were very supportive, and we all worked together to make sure I had that kind of record. So in your case, still looking for your first job, you just want to make sure you don't overpublish in too many different fields. You have to be legible. You can only build legibility in about 2 fields. If you get to a third, you're going to start to look scattered. And so you have to take a really hard look at what fields amongst yours are the ones that hire. So if you have like an option, I don't know, let's say this. You could go into Victorian literature, like that could be one possible job search. Or because you work on like nature poetry, you have also done this whole other thing on environmental humanities. Well, which one of those is more likely to yield a job? Well, I'm going to assume it's the latter. I don't know for sure. You would know better because like you're the expert, you have to investigate. But whichever one of those, you're going to say like, oh my God, there were 9 jobs in that last year. There were 2 in this. So make sure you publish in the area, more in the area that is more hireable. If that makes sense. Okay. All right. So this is an example. Now this is a different person, as you can see. This is no longer the medical anthropologist. This is a person working on poison in Victorian literature. I can't remember why I switched out. I think it was just because I didn't want to have her anonymity too much compromised. So anyway, so she's just explaining her articles. And I've also organized a panel at the upcoming MLA. And then paragraph 5 is on your next project. And that is, again, you do need to have a plan for a next major project. And that is, I mean by that, a major research project. Now, if people in the sciences, it doesn't work the same way. Your next project may well not become apparent to you until after you have a new job, because it will depend on the lab and the people there and the people you're working with. So this may or may not make sense in your career context. In the humanities and social sciences, this makes complete sense. We are the dictators of our own trajectory. We decide. I wrote my first book on X, I'm writing my second book on Y. And so you have to have a plan for what that second book is. And again, this is about your tenurability. Paragraph 6, then we get to teaching. Now, I'm going to anticipate a question. If you are applying to a teaching school, will you turn these, or reverse this order? Yes, you will. You will not spend all those paragraphs on research if you're applying to a community college or to what is absolutely 100% a teaching college. Then you will lead with teaching, and teaching will predominate. You can still mention your research, but it will be later, and it will be less. All I want to say to you guys is, don't assume too quickly that you know that a college is which colleges are actually teaching colleges. There are a lot of colleges out there, including all of the hoity-toity liberal arts colleges of the Northeast, and and then all the ones down here in Southern California, who are liberal arts colleges. They are undergrad schools. They have tenure requirements that are virtually identical to our ones. They are research oriented. So you do not want to go to Pomona, to a job at Pomona or Claremont or I can't think of the other ones, or Bard or Williams or Amherst, and give them a teaching letter, because that's not what they want. They want a research letter. So when you get into the middle tiers of liberal arts colleges, you start to have to parse it very carefully. What is this place anyway? What are they really about? Are they, wait a minute, you know? And it takes some work, but you have to do it. All right. Okay. So teaching. Yeah, this is where you name the courses you can teach, some courses you have taught, and how you teach them. If you have been an adjunct, don't tell a story that is strictly chronological. In 2013, I taught at science college, and then I thought, oh, that's so boring. It's so boring. It tells the wrong information. They don't care where you taught previously. They need to know how you teach, what you teach, and how you teach. So flip it. Take that same info, but change it into, when I teach the survey course in modern American literature, I use blah, blah, blah methods and assignments. I use blah, blah, blah texts. I have blah, blah, blah outcomes. As I say here, this paragraph must not be emotional, weepy, earnest, passionate, tender, or teary-eyed. I ran out of adjectives. But yeah, and it's for the two reasons I mentioned before, but I will beat that dead horse. I will say it again, because A, it doesn't work, it doesn't work because it doesn't provide evidence, and B, because everybody's using it, and that it's white noise. It's just white noise. Okay, so here's a teaching paragraph. This is from anthropology. There's a problem with this teaching paragraph that I would have fixed, knowing now, if I'd known then what I know now. This doesn't name enough classes. It only names one class. It's in my introductory classes. A simple yet effective technique I use is to blah, blah, blah. But I feel like this is getting a little bit, it's a it's a little unfocused. I think that she should be naming probably 1 to 2 more classes by name as the context in which she uses these methods. Otherwise, it's a pretty good teaching paragraph. Yeah.
To what degree can you refer to your TA work in terms of discussing?
If you don't have anything else except for TA work, then talk about TA work. But this is another thing. Your tendency is often to say, well, I have TA'd for Professor Nelson, and I worked with him to blah, blah, blah. That's telling the wrong story. They don't care who you TA'd for. That's a grad student story. That's not a professor story. It would be better if you said, in my sections of the survey class, I used a method like such and such that I found to be very effective, and my students nominated me for TA of the year. That is way more effective. And you didn't mention the professor, and you didn't say that you were you didn't make yourself subordinated to that professor. So TAing is not great experience compared to still teaching your own class. But if all you have is TA experience, then you want to think about how you frame it as the teacher as much as possible. Okay, so a second paragraph on teaching, paragraph 7 of the letter, is optional. Not everybody has that much to say about teaching or feels like they want to for an R1 or an Ivy League job. But for liberal arts colleges and teaching-centric schools, you will totally want this. And this is a great place where you just sort of spin out a little bit just away from basic classroom teaching and get on to other things you've done. Like, did you lead a program? Did you lead a study abroad program? Did you develop certain types of pedagogical interest groups? This is also a very good place if you are a diversity candidate. This is a very good place to bring it up. You can say a line something like, as an African American scholar, I always prioritize issues of race and diversity in the classroom. I use materials such as blah, blah, blah in order to have students explore the question of blah, blah, blah. That's just one stand-in example. But the reason that that's a good way to disclose your diversity identity is because it gives a concrete substance. It isn't just like you're writing this letter going on and on and you say, oh, by the way, I'm black. So, you're going to want to know that. That's very random. So this attaches it to something that they can say, oh, right, yeah, that we can work with that. So,
what does SLAC, second tier liberal article?
what?
Second tier liberal article, is that SLAC? Or
Small.
Oh, small liberal arts
Okay.
college.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Okay. So this is an example of a paragraph like that. As a Latina, I am attentive to issues of race and diversity in the classroom. When I teach such and such, I foreground the writings of so-and-so and so-and-so. I focus on Twitter activism, such as hashtag Black Lives Matter. As a result of my record of such and such, I was awarded the Dean's Teaching Fellowship for the blah, blah academic year. And then she also did work as a director of a study abroad program. So that's what she needed a whole separate paragraph to be able to cover all of that. Okay, we're almost at the end. Paragraph 8 is tailoring, and that is where you actually show that you made a connection to the job at hand. That you went above and beyond. You Googled the department and you looked at the people there, and you studied the job ad very closely, and you're thinking about real connections you might make. And so language like the position is appealing to me because the department's emphasis on X and Y. I would look forward to collaborating with faculty such as Smith and Nelson. Don't call them Professor Smith and Professor Nelson. You're going to want to do that. That's a grad student move. They're just Smith and Nelson. Or if you want to, David Smith and Margaret Nelson. You can do that. But the point is, don't put them up above you. They are not going to be your mentors. Sometimes people send me letters and they say, I would look forward to being mentored by so-and-so, and it's a complete misunderstanding of the purpose of a cover letter for a job. So, and I would look forward to participating in the activities of the center for such and such is also good to mention. People sometimes often ask me, well, I don't think I should mention names because what if it's political and what if I offend somebody? I just find that silly. I do not think you run the risk of offending anybody by naming some names in your cover letter. Nobody's saying that you're going to marry them or be their disciple or be their ally in departmental battles. You're just showing that you did some homework. And to me, that's a sign of respect. And I know when I was on search committees and people went to the trouble to mention that, it always read well. Always. It didn't matter who they named, as long as it made sense that they named them. In other words, they picked the faculty member who really was connected to their work. Then I was like, oh, look, they figured it out. So, yeah. And again, the temptation in the tailoring paragraph is to go emotional again because you're wrapping up and you're like, oh, I'm running out of time to tell them stuff. They have to know how passionate I am. So, and then also the flattery problem. It'd be an honor and a privilege to teach at your illustrious program. Don't do that. Okay. So here's an example of a teaching paragraph. I mean, a tailoring paragraph. Now, she didn't mention any people in this one. So if I were to redo this one now, I would tell her to mention some people. But other than that, this is a good paragraph. Okay, and the sign-off is just 1 or 2 sentences. So thank you for considering my application. I look forward to hearing from you soon. If you live overseas, you may want to explain that you'll be in the country for a conference because their budgets do matter in terms of their ability to fly you in. So if you live in Dubai or something, it is helpful if they know that you are going to be in the United States. But otherwise, there is no need to provide any other additional information there. Okay, so we've gotten through it. That is the 9-paragraph template of a cover letter. Now for the rest of our time, and we have until 2:45? Okay. I'm going to just go real quick. Yeah, don't use a series of I-sentences. Don't cram in everything that you ever did. Don't be very careful with adjectives that are cheap, and I'm going to say more about that in a second, so hang tight. Keep in mind the difference between telling the story of a thing versus telling the story of the research about the thing. Don't lecture them as if they were your undergraduate class about the events of 1789 and who said what to whom. There's a temptation to do that. Don't do that. You're describing your research, not the thing. So avoid lecturing. And also, really, the danger is narcissism, your fascination with your own process. And I'm going to give you some examples of that in a second. Now, I am actually going to go right here so that we can move directly into the narcissism problem. These are what I call the biggest problems with all sorts of job stuff is narcissism, telling not showing, hyper-emotionalism, excessive humility, and inflexibility. So the narcissism really is this thing, this obsession with your process. I have always been fascinated by, and that led me to, and first I looked at it, but then I realized, and that made me, and because of that I had the opportunity to, and I'm thrilled that this resulted in, that's process language and it's narcissistic, and nobody wants to hear it. So replace it with, my dissertation focused on blah, using the blah method, I argued blah. See how much shorter that is? That's info they can use. Telling, not showing, again, is using a bunch of adjectives to try to make a case without evidence. So I'm a passionate and committed teacher who finds innovative ways to engage student interest, needs to be fleshed out with specifics and concrete examples. So show, do not tell. Hyper-emotionalism I've talked about, but you want to be aware of words like fascinated, firmly believe, yearn, love, passionate, desire. Remember the skepticism principle, don't substitute emotions, don't try to pitch yourself on your feelings. Everybody has feelings, they don't set you apart. That sounds terrible, doesn't it? Adjectives and adverbs are a stealth pitfall if they're the wrong kind. These are surprisingly ineffective adjectives and adverbs. Important, innovative, badly understudied, unique, remarkable, new, why? All of that stuff is a bunch of glitz and glamour without any additional value-added information. So if you replace it with, my work is the first to examine the topic of X using the methods of Y and Z, and in this manner it yields the insight that in contrast to previous studies, X can be understood as blah, blah, blah. That's all simple factual work that works in an academic setting. Beware of the humility problem. I would strive, seek, aim, try, and never attempt to become a teacher and scholar worthy of your illustrious department. I was fortunate enough, I trained under, inspired by him, I have attempted. It would be an honor and a privilege, I believe, and so on. That's not language that makes you appeal to potential colleagues at all. They do not like that. And finally, the problem of inflexibility, which is really getting down to something that is not about your writing at all, your presentation, it's about your attitude. If you have set your stuff out, you have a decent record, or regardless, if you've sent your stuff out and you've never made a single long short list, then there is definitely something wrong with your record or with your presentation of the record, or both. And you need to look at it. You really need to examine it. And I am not saying that if you fix this stuff, you're guaranteed a job. You are not. You are not guaranteed a job. There are just not enough jobs. We are oversupplied with PhDs, undersupplied with jobs. So you can do everything I say, and that is not a guarantee, as you know, and I know you know this. But you can tell if you're getting traction. You can tell if people are really interested. And as long as you have a powerful record and you present it in a powerful way, you are going to get some traction, and you're going to be able to weigh for yourself, how am I doing? Should I be optimistic? Do I think do I have a chance? Can I keep doing this for the next 2 or 3 years and keep trying, and do I really have a realistic chance to get a job? And the answer to that may be yes, and you can justify continuing to try. The important thing is that you are not rigid, obstinate, and inflexible, and that you just keep doing the same thing over and over and over again, expecting a different outcome, because that will not happen. Either you have to change your record, you have to change your presentation of the record, or you actually have to say, gosh, I didn't think the academy is for me. I have tried, I have done my best. I can't do this anymore. I just can't do this anymore. Everybody reaches all those stages at different points, so just be flexible to know when you reach that stage for yourself. And I think that's it. So, and I didn't do interviewing, but I'll be happy to answer questions about interviewing if you want, or use this time however you want to. By the way, I am willing to stay here till 3:30 to answer questions, if you have them, if you would like to do that. I know some of you need to take off and go somewhere, so, but I can be here for those who remain. So, thank you very much.
Let's give Dr. Kelsky another
Today,
round of
at
applause.
UCLA.
If you are interested in our industry roundtable discussion, that will be starting at 3 o'clock at the Academy Room. Thank you very much.